Imagine waking up on August 7th, 1945. The war is still going. Soldiers are still dying. And somewhere in the Pacific, a fleet is preparing for an invasion that military planners believe will cost over 1 million lives. Now imagine that the most destructive weapon ever built is sitting in a hangar, and nobody drops it. What happens next? The answer is far stranger than you think. You probably learned about the atomic bomb as a single world-changing moment, a flash of light, a mushroom cloud, an ending. But strip away everything you were taught and ask the question differently. What kind of world exists right now if that moment never happened? The answer rewrites almost everything you think you know about the last 80 years of human history. Let us go back to 1945. Not to Hiroshima, to the meeting rooms, the war rooms, the arguments happening behind closed doors. The war in Europe is over. Germany has surrendered, but Japan has not. The Japanese military is still fighting, island by island, beach by beach. American commanders are drawing up plans for Operation Downfall, a two-phase land invasion of the Japanese home islands scheduled to begin in November 1945. Military historian D.M.G. Greco spent decades analyzing the casualty projections for that invasion. His findings, published in his book Hell to Pay, show that American planners were bracing for between 250,000 and over 1 million American casualties alone. Japanese civilian and military deaths were projected to be far higher. Some estimates suggested the invasion could kill between 5 and 10 million people before Japan surrendered. So already, the calculation is not simple. It never was. Now remove the bomb from history entirely. November 1945 arrives. Operation Downfall begins with the invasion of Kyushu, the southernmost Japanese island. The fighting is catastrophic. Japan had anticipated exactly this landing point and had concentrated over 600,000 troops there. The kamikaze attacks alone would sink or damage hundreds of Allied ships. The battle for Kyushu would likely last months. The second phase, the assault on Honshu and Tokyo, was not projected to begin until March 1946. The war, by almost every military estimate, would not end until late 1946 at the earliest. Here is where history gets strange, because while all of this is happening in the Pacific, something else is happening in the East. The Soviet Union, which declared war on Japan just 2 days after Hiroshima, is advancing rapidly into Manchuria and Korea. Without the bomb forcing a sudden Japanese surrender, that Soviet advance does not stop at the 38th parallel. It keeps going. Soviet forces reach the Korean peninsula in full, and without a sudden end to the war, the United States and the Soviet Union are likely to negotiate a divided occupation of Japan itself, much like they divided Germany, northern Japan, southern Japan. Two separate nations, two separate trajectories. Historian Tsuyoshi Hasegawa, in his landmark book Racing the Enemy, makes exactly this argument. He contends that the Soviet entry into the war was at least as decisive as the atomic bombs in forcing Japan's surrender. Remove the bombs, and the Soviets do not stop. The map of Asia in 2025 looks nothing like it does today. Think about what that means for you right now. The electronics in your pocket, the global supply chains that built them, the geopolitical alliances that define your world. All of it is downstream from that single moment in August 1945. Pull the thread, and everything unravels differently. But there is another layer underneath this, one that most people never consider. The atomic bomb was not just a weapon, it was a signal. A message sent not to Japan, but to the Soviet Union. American Secretary of War Henry Stimson wrote in his diary that he was acutely aware the bomb would fundamentally reshape the post-war balance of power. The bomb gave the United States a monopoly on the most destructive force in human history, and that monopoly defined the next decade of global politics. Without the bomb, there is no nuclear monopoly. The Cold War, if it happens at all, looks completely different. The arms race that defined the second half of the 20th century does not begin with an American trump card. It begins with rough parity. Two exhausted superpowers, both scarred by war, both without a decisive technological edge over the other. Some historians argue this actually increases the risk of conventional war in Europe. Others argue it forces an earlier diplomatic settlement. Nobody knows. That is the honest answer. Nobody knows. What we do know is this. The bomb changed the psychology of war itself. Political scientist Kenneth Waltz argued for decades that nuclear weapons, counterintuitively, made the world safer. His theory of nuclear deterrence rests on a simple and terrifying logic. When both sides can destroy each other, neither side starts a fight. The Cold War stayed cold, he argued, precisely because of the bomb. Two superpowers, each capable of obliterating the other, each choosing not to pull the trigger because the cost was too high. Without the bomb, that deterrent does not exist. The Soviet Union and the United States are two heavily armed conventional powers in a world still smoldering from the deadliest conflict in human history. The Korean War, which became a limited conflict partly because both sides feared escalation into nuclear exchange, might not stay limited. The Cuban Missile Crisis, which was fundamentally about nuclear weapons, does not happen in its current form. But something else might happen instead. Something without a clear off-ramp. And here is the thing that should make you stop. You are alive right now, reading this, in a world that was shaped by a weapon designed to end lives on an industrial scale. The post-war economic boom, the founding of the United Nations, the decolonization movements across Asia and Africa, the space race, the internet. All of it happened inside a specific geopolitical container, a container shaped by the existence of nuclear weapons. Remove those weapons from history, and every single domino falls differently. Physicist and historian Richard Rhodes, who won the Pulitzer Prize for his definitive account of the bomb's creation, wrote that the atomic age did not begin with a bang, it began with a choice. A choice made by a small group of exhausted, frightened, and well-intentioned men who believed they were ending a war. What they could not see, what no one could see, is that they were also beginning one. The longest undeclared war in human history. A war fought not with armies, but with the permanent threat of annihilation. That war is still going. You are living inside it right now. Every treaty, every diplomatic negotiation, every military alliance on Earth is still shaped by the logic that was born in the skies over Japan in August 1945. So what if the bomb was never dropped? Maybe the war ends in 1946, after millions more die in a land invasion. Maybe Japan is divided like Germany, and the Asia you live in today does not exist. Maybe the Cold War turns hot in Europe without a nuclear deterrent to keep both sides frozen in place. Maybe the world develops nuclear weapons anyway, just slower, just later, just in a different order. Or maybe, without the demonstration of what these weapons actually do to human beings, the taboo against using them never forms. And the next conflict, whenever it comes, crosses a line that our world, for all its terror, has not yet crossed. The bomb did not just end a war, it rewrote the rules of war itself. And tonight, when you watch the news, when you read about tensions between nuclear powers, when you feel that low, constant hum of anxiety about the state of the world, you are feeling the aftershock of a choice made 80 years ago by men who believed they were choosing the lesser evil. The question is not whether they were right. The question is whether you, living in the world they made, would have chosen differently.